I'm Cassie Mitchell, 28, sitting in my beachfront condo and watching the sunset while holding today's newspaper. The headline reads, Family Searches for Missing Lottery Winner. My phone buzzes with another call from my mother, the fifth today. 6 months ago, I won $620,000 in the lottery. The day I won the lottery should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, it showed me exactly how little I meant to my own family. Before I dive into my story, where are you watching from today? If you're enjoying these real-life stories, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. When I was just the forgotten daughter living in my sister's shadow. Growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I always felt like an afterthought in my own family. Our modest 2-story house with its small backyard was comfortable enough, but inside those walls existed a clear hierarchy that I could never climb. My sister, Allison, 3 years older at 31, was what everyone called the golden child. From kindergarten through college, she maintained a perfect 4 gigapascals, won the state beauty pageant twice, and earned athletic scholarships in both swimming and volleyball. Her bedroom walls were lined with trophies, medals, and certificates that my parents proudly showcased to every visitor. Look what our Allison accomplished, they'd beam. While I stood awkwardly in the doorway, my parents, Richard and Diane Mitchell, never tried to hide their favoritism. Dad owned a local hardware store that had been struggling since the big box retailers moved in about 8 years ago. Mom worked as an office manager at a dental practice. They weren't wealthy, but they managed to scrape together enough to send Allison to tennis camp each summer and buy her a used BMW for her 16th birthday. When my 16th birthday rolled around, I received a bus pass and a lecture about financial responsibility. "We just don't have the money right now, Cassie," Mom explained, while Dad nodded solemnly. 2 weeks later, they surprised Allison with an expensive laptop for making the dean's list again. When I brought home my first A in advanced math, Mom glanced at it and said, "That's nice, honey. Did you see that Allison was accepted into the National Honor Society?" When I won second place in a regional art competition, Dad said, "Well, second isn't bad. Keep trying." Despite maintaining a solid B-plus average while working weekends at the local grocery store, I was constantly reminded that I wasn't quite measuring up. By the time high school graduation came around, I had saved some money but nowhere near enough for a 4-year college. Allison, meanwhile, had secured a full scholarship to Northwestern University, complete with a stipend for book. "We're just so proud," Mom gushed at Allison's graduation party, which featured catered food and nearly 100 guests. My graduation party consisted of pizza in our backyard, with a few relatives and 2 friends. I cobbled together enough from my savings and a small loan to attend community college, working night shifts at a diner and weekend shifts at a clothing store to cover my expenses. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with secondhand furniture and a persistent draft in winter. Meanwhile, my parents helped Allison furnish her off-campus apartment during her master's program with new IKEA furniture and kitchen appliances. "Your sister needs to focus on her studies," Mom explained when I asked why they couldn't help me with my electric bill during a particularly tight month. Life continued this way for years. I graduated with an associate's degree in business administration and landed an administrative assistant job at a marketing firm. The pay was modest, but I was proud to be fully independent, even if my parents seemed unimpressed by my achievement. Then came the pandemic, followed by company downsizing, and my name was on the cut list. "Last hired, first fired," my manager said apologetically. At 27, I found myself unemployed, dipping into my meager savings and applying for dozens of jobs daily with no responses. Around this same time, Allison's seemingly perfect life hit its first major snag. Her husband of 3 years, a corporate attorney named Ryan, filed for divorce after discovering her affair with his colleague. Suddenly, the golden child moved back home to our parents' house, occupying her old bedroom still decorated with her high school achievements. "Your sister is going through a difficult time," Mom informed me during our monthly phone call. "We need to support her right now." Support translated to my father helping her with divorce lawyer fees, and my mother cooking Allison's favorite meals while she processed her emotions. No one asked how I was handling unemployment or if I needed any support. 3 months into my job search, with my savings dwindling dangerously low and rent due in a week, I stopped at a gas station to put $15 worth of gas in my aging Honda Civic. On impulse, I spent my last $5 on a lottery ticket, something I'd never done before. I tucked it into my wallet and promptly forgot about it until 2 days later, when I was searching for a quarter to do laundry. That forgotten ticket would change everything, though not in the way most lottery stories go. The evening I discovered I'd won was unremarkable at first. I'd spent the day applying for jobs online and was heating up leftover pasta for dinner when I remembered the lottery ticket. The drawing had been the night before, so I pulled up the numbers on my phone without much expectation. I had to check the numbers 5 times before I believed it. Even then, I thought there must be some mistake. People like me, people who could barely make rent, who grew up in the shadow of perfect siblings, who had never had a lucky break we don't win lotteries. Yet there it was, a perfect match. 6 numbers that suddenly translated to $620,000. My hands shook so badly I dropped my phone. I paced around my small apartment, alternating between hysterical laughter and stunned silence. I called no one. I celebrated alone, dancing in my socks on the worn carpet, tears streaming down my face. After the initial shock wore off, I did what any responsible adult with access to the internet would do. I researched. I spent that entire night reading about lottery winners, their mistakes, their successes, the curse or blessing that sudden wealth could bring. I learned that winners often ended up worse off than before, bankrupt within a few years, relationships destroyed, lives ruined by mismanagement and impulse decisions. I was determined not to become a statistic. The next morning, I called in sick to my part-time retail job and made an appointment with a financial advisor recommended by an online forum for windfall recipients. I also researched lottery rules in my state and discovered I could remain anonymous if I claimed the prize through a trust. 3 days later, I sat in the office of Thomas Reynolds, a certified financial planner who specialized in sudden wealth management. He didn't talk down to me or try to push investment products. Instead, he listened carefully as I outlined my goals: security, education, modest living improvements, and smart growth. Most people in your situation immediately buy expensive cars and houses, he noted. I'm impressed by your approach. Together, we created a plan. After taxes, I would have approximately $440,000. I would put $250,000 into diversified investments, $100,000 into a high-yield savings account as an emergency fund, $50,000 toward finishing my bachelor's degree, and $40,000 for immediate needs like a reliable car and moving to a slightly better apartment. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed lottery winner. A week after claiming my winnings through a newly established trust, I invited my family to dinner at a mid-priced restaurant, nothing too fancy that might raise suspicions. My parents arrived first, both looking tired. Dad's hardware store was barely staying afloat, and Mom had recently been talking about needing some dental work she'd been putting off due to cost. Allison arrived 15 minutes late, making an entrance in designer sunglasses, and immediately launching into a story about a job interview she'd had that day. "The salary is below what I'm worth," she complained, "but beggars can't be choosers, I guess." I waited until we'd ordered our food before sharing my news. "I have something to tell you all," I said, taking a deep breath. "I won the lottery last week. After taxes, it's about $440,000. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but it felt eternal. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad's eyes widened, calculations already running behind them. Allison's mouth formed a perfect O. "Oh my God, Cassie," Mom finally exclaimed, reaching across to grab my hand. "That's wonderful news. Our prayers have been answered." "Our prayers?" I thought, but smiled politely. "That's quite fortunate," Dad said carefully. "Very fortunate indeed. Have you thought about what you'll do with it?" I outlined my financial plan, emphasizing the importance of investing for long-term security. "But surely you'll help family first," Mom interjected, exchanging glances with Dad. "Of course family matters," I replied cautiously. "I want everyone to be okay." "Well," Allison said with a tight smile, Some people have all the luck, don't they? I work my butt off my whole life, and you buy one lottery ticket. Luck versus deserving, you mean? I asked before I could stop myself. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. What your sister means, Dad said quickly, is that it's interesting how life works out. You've struggled to find your path, and now this opportunity falls into your lap. It's providential. The conversation moved on, but I noticed how my parents kept exchanging meaningful looks. Mom mentioned her dental work 3 times. Dad brought up the hardware store's mortgage. Allison talked about her student loans and the unfairness of her divorce settlement. By the time dessert arrived, my stomach was in knots. Their congratulations felt hollow, their interest in my windfall all too transparent. As I paid the bill, insisted on paying the bill, I had the distinct feeling that in their eyes, my lottery win wasn't really mine at all. It was family money now. The text from my father came at 7:30 the next morning. Family meeting at the house, 2 p.m. Important to discuss your future plans. Mom making your favorite lasagna. My favorite was actually eggplant parmesan. Allison was the lasagna fan, but I didn't correct him. I spent the morning meeting with a real estate agent to look at modest apartments in safer neighborhoods. Then drove to my parents' house with a sense of foreboding I couldn't shake. They were waiting for me in the living room, arranged like a tribunal. Dad sat in his recliner, a yellow legal pad covered with numbers on his lap. Mom perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly together. Allison lounged in the armchair by the window, scrolling through her phone with apparent disinterest. Cassie, honey, we've been talking, Mom began once I'd sat down, about your windfall and about family obligations. Dad cleared his throat and adjusted his reading glasses. We've made some calculations about family needs that should take priority, he said, gesturing to his notepad. Practical matters that would secure everyone's future. He turned the pad toward me, revealing a neatly itemized list. Business debt, $85. Allison's student loans, $42,000. Remaining mortgage, $120,000. Mom's dental work divided by medical needs, $30,000. Family home repairs, $25,000. Nest egg for parents' retirement, $100,000. The total, $402,000. Almost all of my after-tax winnings. We thought you could keep the rest for yourself, Mom added, as if they were being tremendously generous. About $40,000 is still a nice sum to have for a young person. I stared at them, waiting for someone to laugh, to say it was all a joke. No one did. You want me to give you 90% of my lottery winnings? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It's not giving, Dad corrected. It's fulfilling family obligations. We raised you for 18 years. Put food on your table, clothes on your back, a roof over your head. That's a significant investment. Investment, I repeated. Like I'm a stock that's finally paying dividends? Don't be dramatic, Cassie, Allison sighed, looking up from her phone. We're talking about family support. You wouldn't even have needed to win the lottery if you'd applied yourself like I did. My student loans only exist because I pursued higher education. And I'm working on my bachelor's degree now, I countered. Part of my financial plan includes finishing school. Community college is hardly the same as Northwestern, Allison scoffed. Mom shot her a warning look before turning back to me with a practiced, sympathetic expression. Sweetheart, we're not asking for everything. We just need help. And now you're in a position to provide it. I took several deep breaths, trying to organize my thoughts. I understand you all have needs, I said carefully. And I want to help. I could contribute toward Dad's business debt and Mom's medical procedures. Maybe $50,000 total, but I need to secure my own future too. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Dad's face flushed red. Mom's sympathetic mask slipped, revealing disappointment and anger. $50,000? Dad repeated incredulously. Out of nearly $500,000? That's what your family is worth to you? Richard, Mom murmured, placing a hand on his arm. She turned to me. Cassie, honey, I don't think you understand. Your father and I sacrificed everything for you girls. We went without so you could have opportunities. You went without for Allison, I corrected quietly. I worked through school, bought my own car, paid my own rent since I was 19. Here we go again with the victim mentality, Allison muttered. That's not fair, I said, feeling tears threatening. I'm not playing victim. I'm just stating fact. The fact is, Dad interrupted, that this money could solve all our family's problems. Instead, you're being selfish. I'm not being selfish. I'm being practical, I insisted, my voice rising. Most lottery winners go broke because they give everything away or spend impulsively. We're not asking you to give everything away, Mom said. We're your family. The conversation circled for another hour, growing increasingly heated. By the end, I was in tears. Dad was shouting, Mom was guilt-tripping, and Allison was making snide comments about my newfound superiority complex. I left without eating the lasagna, driving aimlessly around town until my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Cassie? It's Uncle James, my father's younger brother. We weren't close. He lived in Arizona and rarely visited, but I had always liked him. I heard about your win, he said. And knowing my brother, I can guess how today's family meeting went. I pulled over and broke down, telling him everything. Listen carefully, he said when I finished. This isn't the first time Richard has tried to control family money. He did the same to me when I received an inheritance from our grandmother, pressured me into investing in his first business. I lost everything. What should I do? I asked, wiping away tears. Set boundaries now, he advised. Be clear about what you're willing to give, if anything, and don't back down. They'll push hard, but remember, it's your money. You don't owe anyone your financial security, not even family. His words gave me the courage to drive home and formulate a plan. I would offer $50,000, a fair amount that wouldn't compromise my future, and stand firm. If they couldn't accept that, then perhaps we needed distance until they could respect my decision. I had no idea how quickly things would escalate from there. The week following the disastrous family meeting was like living in a pressure cooker with the valve sealed shut. My phone buzzed constantly, with texts and calls from my parents and Allison, ranging from guilt-tripping to outright hostility. After all we've done for you, read one text from Mom at 6:30 a.m. Family takes care of family, Dad wrote at noon. Must be nice to be so selfish, Allison texted at dinner time. I tried to maintain boundaries, responding only with variations of, I've made my offer of help. I hope you can respect my decision. By Wednesday, the digital barrage wasn't enough. I looked up from my computer at work to see my mother standing in the reception area, her eyes red from crying. Mrs. Mitchell, my supervisor said with concern, Cassie didn't mention you were coming by today. Family emergency, Mom sniffled, looking pointedly at me. I need to speak with my daughter. I led her to the small break room, mortified and angry. Mom, you can't just show up at my workplace. You haven't been answering my calls, she countered. What choice did I have? Your father is meeting with the bank tomorrow. They're threatening to call in his loans. My heart sank. I'm sorry about Dad's business troubles, but that doesn't justify. He might lose everything, Cassie. Everything he's worked for. Is that what you want? I took a deep breath. Of course not. But I've already offered to help with part of his debt. I can't solve all the family's financial problems with my lottery win. Can't? Or won't? She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I never thought my own daughter would turn her back on her family when we needed her most. She left after extracting a promise that I would reconsider my position. I returned to my desk shaken, only to find 3 missed calls from Dad and a text from Allison. Way to make Mom cry. Again. That evening, my doorbell rang. It was my father's business partner, Gerald, a man I'd known since childhood. Your dad didn't send me, he said immediately, looking uncomfortable on my doorstep. In fact, he'd be furious if he knew I was here. But Cassie, I'm worried about him, about what he might do. What do you mean? Gerald shifted his weight. The business is in worse shape than he's letting on. There are some irregularities in the book. I think he's been moving money around, taking from accounts he shouldn't. If we can't make the payment tomorrow, I felt sick. Are you saying he might be committing fraud? I'm saying he's desperate. And desperate people make bad decisions. After Gerald left, I called Uncle James again. They're escalating, I told him, using every emotional lever they can find. It'll get worse, he warned. When emotional manipulation doesn't work, they'll try other tactics. He wasn't wrong. The next morning, I woke to notifications that I'd been tagged in several social media posts by Allison. She had shared old family photos with captions like, "Family is supposed to support each other through thick and thin. Guess some people forget where they came from once they get money." And it's amazing how lottery money can turn the most ungrateful person into an even more ungrateful person. Friends from high school began messaging me. "Everything okay with your family? Wow. You won the lottery and won't help your parents?" Harsh. I felt my carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. My reputation was being systematically dismantled by my own sister, and my parents were doing nothing to stop it. That afternoon, Uncle James called me. "I've been talking to your Aunt Linda. We think you should know some things about family history that might put this in perspective." Over the next hour, he revealed patterns I'd never been aware of. How my father had pressured relatives for loans that were never repaid, how my mother had manipulated family gatherings to extract financial commitments from wealthier relations, how they had systematically isolated anyone who refused their demands. "Your grandmother changed her will 3 times because of their pressure," he explained. "They've always seen family money as communal, with them as the distributors." Armed with this knowledge and desperate to end the siege, I decided to make one final attempt at compromise. I texted my parents. "I'm willing to provide $50,000 to help with the most urgent needs. That's my final offer. We can discuss terms this weekend." My phone rang immediately. It was my father. "We're having dinner at the house tomorrow at 7. Come ready to discuss real solutions, not insulting offers." I arrived at my parents' house the next evening to find Allison's car already in the driveway. Inside, the dining room table was set with the good china, the set reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Mom had prepared an elaborate meal, and Dad had opened an expensive bottle of wine. The stage was set for reconciliation, but the atmosphere felt orchestrated, like a trap carefully laid. Before we begin, Dad said once we were seated, "I want us to remember that we're family. Blood matters more than money." I nodded cautiously, serving myself a small portion of roasted chicken. "We've discussed your offer," he continued, emphasis making clear what he thought of my $50,000 proposal. "And while we appreciate the gesture, it's simply not adequate for our family's needs. I understand that $50,000 doesn't solve everything," I began. "But it's what you can comfortably give," Dad interrupted, his calm facade cracking slightly. "Comfort isn't the issue here. Necessity is." Mom placed her hand over his. "What your father means is that we have immediate needs that can't wait. His business, my medical procedures, the mortgage, and my student loans," Allison added. "Which I only have because I pursued a real education." The familiar jab stung, but I held my ground. "I understand everyone has needs. I'm trying to find a balance that helps without compromising my own future security." "Balance?" Dad's voice rose. "You have $440,000. We're asking for what we need to survive. You're asking for 90% of what I have," I countered. "And you'd still have more than you had 2 weeks ago?" Allison snapped. "More than you deserve." The word hung in the air. Deserve. "Is that what this is about?" I asked quietly. "What you think I deserve versus what Allison deserves. Don't make this about childhood jealousy," Mom said quickly. "Isn't it, though?" I pressed. "If Allison had won the lottery, would you be demanding she give most of it to me?" The uncomfortable silence answered my question. "I think," Dad said finally, his voice deadly quiet, "that you need to consider your position carefully, Cassandra. This family has supported you your entire life. Now it's your turn. Either you help your family as we've outlined, or what?" I whispered. He met my eyes, his own cold and unfamiliar. "Or you're no daughter of mine. It's that simple. Give half to your sister, or leave. Your choice." Mom gasped softly but didn't contradict him. Allison's expression shifted from shock to a subtle smugness. I stood slowly, legs shaking. "Then I guess I'm not your daughter anymore." I walked out, their voices rising behind me in a cacophony of threats and pleas. In my car, I sat trembling, keys in hand, as my mother ran down the driveway. "Cassie, he didn't mean it. Come back inside, we can talk about this reasonably." I drove away, her figure growing smaller in my rearview mirror. already wondering how I would ever feel safe again. 3 days after walking out of my parents' house, I returned to my apartment after a job interview to find something wrong. The deadbolt was locked, which was normal, but the handle turned without resistance. I distinctly remembered locking it. Inside, nothing seemed obviously disturbed, but the air felt different, as if someone else had been breathing in my space. I moved cautiously through the rooms, noticing subtle signs. A drawer not fully closed, couch cushions slightly askew, my laptop at a different angle than I'd left it. In my bedroom, the real evidence emerged. My filing cabinet was unlocked, and papers inside had been shuffled. The folder containing my financial documents was visibly thinner. My hands shaking, I called the bank where I'd established accounts after my win. I need to verify that there have been no access attempts on my accounts, I explained to the customer service representative. Actually, Miss Mitchell, there was an attempt yesterday, she replied after checking. Someone came to the branch with your social security card and birth certificate, claiming to be authorized to access your accounts. Our manager became suspicious when they couldn't answer security questions and refused access. Ice flooded my veins. Did they get any information? No, but they were quite persistent. The manager made copies of the identification they presented and reported the incident. Would you like to place additional security measures on your accounts? I authorized the highest security protocols available, then called my financial advisor to do the same with my investment account. Finally, I called the building manager to check if anyone had requested access to my apartment. Your sister stopped by, he confirmed. Said you'd asked her to pick up some documents you needed. She had a key, so I didn't think anything of it. The spare key. I'd given it to Allison years ago for emergencies and forgotten about it. Stomach churning with betrayal, I called the local police department to report the break-in and attempted fraud. An officer arrived an hour later, took my statement, and suggested I check my apartment's security camera footage. I hadn't even known our building had security cameras. The footage from the hallway clearly showed Allison using my key to enter my apartment, staying for nearly 40 minutes, then leaving with a manila envelope tucked under her arm. Would you like to press charges? The officer asked. The question stunned me. Press charges against my own sister? I need to think about it, I managed. After the officer left, I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, trying to process the depth of this betrayal. Finally, I called Allison directly. She answered on the first ring. Calling to apologize? She asked coolly. Calling to ask why you broke into my apartment and stole my financial documents? I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. A long pause followed. I don't know what you're talking about. The building has security cameras. Allison. I've seen the footage. The bank has reported the attempted fraud. Do you want to try again? Another pause then. It wasn't my idea. Whose idea was it to commit identity theft? Mom's? Dad's? They're desperate, Cassie, she suddenly shouted. Dad's business is about to go under. Mom needs surgery. My student loans are killing me. We needed help, and you refused. So you thought stealing from me was the answer? We weren't stealing, she insisted. Just borrowing against what you owe the family. I don't owe you anything, I said quietly. They promised me half, she admitted in a small voice. If I could get access to your accounts, I'd get half of whatever I could withdraw. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't breathe for a moment. That's not borrowing, Allison. That's theft, and it's a crime. Are you going to press charges? She asked, suddenly sounding frightened. Against your own family? I haven't decided yet, I answered truthfully. But I want you to understand something clearly. If you or Mom or Dad ever try to access my finances again, I will press charges immediately. This ends now. I hung up as she began to protest. 10 minutes later, Uncle James called. I just got off the phone with your father, he said without preamble. He's furious. Says you're threatening to have Allison arrested. I explained what had happened. Jesus, he breathed. I knew they'd escalate, but this. Cassie, listen to me. They're getting dangerous. Richard mentioned coming to talk sense into you this weekend, and I don't like his tone. What should I do? Do you have somewhere safe you can go? Somewhere they wouldn't think to look? I thought about my small circle of friends, most of whom were connected to my family in some way. Not really. Then maybe it's time to consider a clean break. A fresh start somewhere new. You mean Just leave? Disappear? Sometimes, he said gently. Distance is the only way to break toxic patterns. I did it 30 years ago when I moved to Arizona. Never regretted it. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, the walls suddenly feeling like they were closing in. Every creak made me jump. Would my father really show up unannounced? What would he do if I refused him again? That night, I barely slept. Around 3 a.m., I jolted awake in a cold sweat, heart pounding from a nightmare where my family was hunting me through an endless maze. I sat up, gasping for air, and in that moment of clarity, I made my decision. Uncle James was right. I needed to disappear. Not forever, not permanently, just long enough to secure my finances, establish boundaries, and find my footing away from their influence. As dawn broke, I made a list of everything I would need to do. A plan began to take shape, careful, methodical, leaving no loose ends. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of calm purpose. They had pushed me to the breaking point, but in doing so, they had set me free. Planning a disappearance, I discovered, requires meticulous attention to detail. One missed connection, one overlooked trace, and the entire effort could be compromised. For 2 weeks, I operated with the precision of someone arranging a complicated heist, except the only thing I was stealing was myself. My first meeting was with Thomas Reynolds, my financial advisor, who listened without judgment as I explained the situation. Unfortunately, I've seen similar scenarios with sudden wealth, he said. Family pressure can turn toxic quickly. Let's make sure your finances are secure before anything else. We spent 3 hours creating a financial fortress, changing account numbers, establishing new accounts in a different bank in a different state, setting up complex verification requirements, and ensuring that no one, not even someone with my social security number and birth certificate, could access my funds without my physical presence and multiple forms of biometric identification. Next came my lawyer, Janet Kim, recommended by Thomas. She helped me create a revocable trust and transfer my assets into it. This creates another layer of protection, she explained. Even if someone somehow accessed your personal accounts, the trust is a separate legal entity. She also advised me on the legal implications of disappearing versus formally relocating. You have no legal obligation to tell anyone where you live, she assured me. Not even family. Just make sure you forward your mail, file change of address forms, and continue paying your taxes. With my finances secured, I turned to the practical aspects of relocation. I researched states with favorable tax laws and affordable beachfront properties, a dream I'd had since childhood but never thought possible. Florida emerged as the frontrunner. No state income tax, reasonable property prices outside the major tourist areas, and enough distance from Michigan to make accidental encounters virtually impossible. I contacted real estate agents in 3 different Florida coastal communities, explaining that I was looking for a quiet relocation. One in particular, Marissa Johnson, in a small Gulf Coast town, understood immediately what I needed. I work with many clients seeking fresh starts, she said during our video call. I can show you properties virtually first, and we can arrange for you to view your top choices in person when you arrive. At work, I submitted my resignation, citing a family emergency requiring relocation. My supervisor, who had witnessed my mother's emotional ambush, didn't question my decision. You've always been reliable, Cassie, she said, signing my paperwork. I'm happy to provide references when you're settled again. I began packing methodically, sorting my belongings into 3 categories: necessities to take immediately, items to have shipped later, and things to donate or discard. I was surprised by how little actually mattered to me, how few possessions I felt attached to after years of modest living. The most challenging aspect was my digital footprint. I didn't want to vanish completely. That would only trigger missing person reports and police involvement. Instead, I needed to become more difficult to locate while maintaining a legal existence. I adjusted privacy settings on all social media accounts, removed location data, and untagged myself from family photos. I didn't delete accounts that would raise red flags, but made them virtually information-free zones. I changed my email address and phone number, setting up forwarding systems that would delay but eventually deliver important messages. My lease was conveniently ending in 3 weeks. I informed my landlord I wouldn't be renewing, but paid through the end of the month to give myself flexibility. The building manager, still apologetic about the Allison incident, agreed to be discreet about my departure date. Throughout these preparations, my family continued their campaign. Daily calls and texts oscillated between guilt trips, Mom cried all night, threats, Dad's talking about legal action, and occasional attempts at reconciliation. Can't we just talk about this reasonably? I responded minimally, buying time without making commitments. Uncle James became my lifeline, calling every few days to check on my progress and offer encouragement. "They've been asking if I've heard from you," he told me during one call. "I've been vague, but Richard knows me too well. He's suspicious." "I'm almost ready," I assured him. "Another week at most. Be careful," he warned. "Your father mentioned driving by your apartment yesterday. They're watching you." That night, I noticed a car idling across from my building, my father's sedan. He didn't approach, just watched my windows for nearly an hour before driving away. The surveillance confirmed I'd made the right decision. The final piece fell into place when I found a temporary rental in Naples, Florida, a furnished beachfront condo available for 3 months, giving me time to find a permanent home. I booked it under my newly established trust name, arranged for utilities, and confirmed high-speed internet for remote job hunting. On my last night in the apartment, I packed my car methodically in the building's underground garage where I couldn't be observed. Essential documents, clothes, laptop, and a few sentimental items filled my Honda's trunk and back seat. I arranged for a shipping company to collect the few boxes I wanted to keep the following week, to be delivered to a storage facility in Florida until I had a permanent address. I set my departure for 5 a.m. early enough to avoid typical surveillance, late enough to have decent driving visibility. I left no note, no explanation. My rent was paid, my affairs in order. I was not running away. I was moving forward. As I pulled out of the garage in the pre-dawn darkness, I felt a moment of paralyzing doubt. Was I overreacting? Was this too extreme a response to family pressure? Then I remembered my father's ultimatum. Give half to your sister or leave. I remembered Allison stealing my documents, attempting to access my account. I remembered my mother appearing at my workplace, weaponizing tears and guilt. At the state line, I pulled over at a rest stop and watched the sunrise. My phone buzzed with a text from Uncle James. "Safe travels. Call when you're settled." I took a deep breath and made one last call to him before changing my phone number. "I'm on my way," I told him. "I'll contact you from my new number when I'm settled." "I'm proud of you, Cassie," he said. This took courage. "Will you tell them anything?" I asked. "Only that you're safe and have asked for space. Nothing more." I thanked him, ended the call, and looked at my phone one last time. 37 missed calls and texts from my parents and Allison since yesterday. I powered it off, removed the SIM card, and inserted the new one I'd purchased. With the sun climbing higher in the sky, I pulled back onto the interstate, heading south. In the rearview mirror, I watched Michigan grow smaller until it disappeared completely. I wasn't running away. I was running toward myself. The temporary rental in Naples exceeded my expectations. Located on the 3rd floor of a small complex, it featured a spacious balcony overlooking the Gulf of Mexico, where dolphins occasionally surfaced during my morning coffee ritual. The interior was decorated in typical Florida-style wicker furniture, blue and white color scheme, and paintings of seascape. It wasn't my personal aesthetic, but it served as a blank slate, a transitional space between my old life and whatever came next. For the first week, I did little besides sleep, walk on the beach, and decompress. The constant tension I'd been carrying in my shoulders and jaw began to ease. I'd wake to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and experience a moment of disorientation before remembering. I was safe. I was free. By the second week, I established a routine. Mornings began with yoga on the balcony, followed by job applications and property searches. Afternoons were reserved for exploring my new surroundings, learning the local grocery stores, finding the best coffee shops, identifying which beaches were crowded with tourists and which remained relatively quiet. It was during one of these exploration days that I met Tara. I had signed up for a community yoga class at the local recreation center, positioning my mat in the back corner where I could observe without being observed, a habit from childhood that had recently intensified. The instructor was running late, and the woman on the mat next to mine turned with a friendly smile. "First time here?" she asked. I nodded, instinctively guarded. "Me too. I just moved from Chicago last month." "I'm Tara." "Cassie," I replied, then hesitated, wondering if I should have used a different name. "Well, Cassie, wanna grab coffee after class? I know a place with amazing blueberry muffins, and I'm desperately in need of friends who don't ask about Chicago weather." Her directness was disarming. After 6 weeks of strategic isolation, the prospect of simple human connection was suddenly overwhelming. I found myself agreeing before I could overthink it. That coffee turned into lunch, which evolved into a genuine friendship, my first in this new life. Tara was a graphic designer who worked remotely, recently divorced, with no children and a refreshing absence of drama. She asked normal questions about my past, and I answered with carefully edited truths. Yes, I was from Michigan. No, I wasn't close with my family. Yes, I had worked in administrative roles but was looking to transition into something more creative. She never pushed when I deflected, never probed when I changed the subject. It was a friendship built on present tense rather than shared history, and I found it liberating. By week 5, I had expanded my circle to include Tara's neighbor Martin, a retired English professor who recommended books and made terrible puns, and Sophia, the owner of the coffee shop who gradually upgraded me from customer to friend who gets occasional free pastries. It was Sophia who inadvertently shattered my carefully constructed bubble. I was helping her reorganize the shop's small library nook when she gasped at something on her phone. "Oh my God, listen to this," she said, turning the screen toward me. "Family searches for missing lottery winner." A Michigan family is desperately seeking information about their daughter, Cassie Mitchell, who disappeared shortly after winning a significant lottery prize. The parents, Richard and Diane Mitchell, fear their daughter may be mentally unstable following her unexpected windfall. The world tilted sideways. Sophia continued reading, but her voice became distant, underwater. There was my school photo from senior year, my full name, my hometown. The article quoted my father claiming concern about my erratic behavior after winning, my mother pleading for contact, Allison suggesting the money had changed me. "Cassie, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just that poor family." Later that night, I searched online and found multiple articles. My disappearance had made local news in Michigan, with increasingly dramatic headlines. "Lottery winner vanishes without trace. Family fears for missing daughter's mental health. The curse of the lottery. Michigan woman disappears after win." Comments sections brimmed with speculation. I'd been kidnapped for the money. I'd run off with a secret lover. I was mentally ill. I was selfish and ungrateful. Most articles included quotes from my father about my history of emotional instability, entirely fabricated, and my mother's tearful pleas for me to come home where you belong. Some featured Allison lamenting how money had changed her sweet little sister into someone unrecognizable. The narrative they'd constructed was devastatingly effective. The concerned family searching for their troubled daughter who couldn't handle sudden wealth. Not a word about their demands, their ultimatum, their attempted theft. Panic set in. Had they filed a missing persons report? Were police actively searching? Could I be forcibly returned to Michigan if found? I called Janet, my lawyer, the next morning. "They've gone to the media," I explained, my voice shaking, claiming I'm mentally unstable, that they're worried about me. "I expected this," Janet said calmly. "The good news is you're an adult who has committed no crime. You have every right to relocate without informing family members. But what about the missing persons angle?" "I'll handle it," she assured me. "We'll send a brief statement through my office to the relevant authorities confirming you're safe, mentally sound, and have chosen to distance yourself from family. No details about your location, just confirmation that you're not actually missing." Will that stop the media coverage? It should reduce it significantly. Without the missing person angle, it's just a family disagreement, much less newsworthy. True to her word, Janet drafted and delivered a statement within hours. 3 days later, a small follow-up article appeared. Lottery winner confirms safety, requests privacy. The news cycle moved on, though my anxiety lingered. I changed my appearance slightly, cutting my long brown hair to shoulder length and adding subtle highlights. I became more cautious about social media, even with my enhanced privacy settings. I used my trust name for most transactions. Small precautions that helped me feel secure. Despite this disruption, my new life continued to take shape. During my second month in Florida, I found the perfect permanent home, a 2-bedroom condo in a small complex with private beach access, a community pool, and 24-hour security. The property was listed under my trust, the purchase handled electronically through Janet to maintain privacy. Around this same time, I decided to pursue the career I'd always wanted but never thought possible. Using my associate's degree in business as a foundation, I enrolled in online graphic design courses, while also starting a small freelance business creating logos and websites for local businesses. My first major client was Sophia's coffee shop. When she learned I was studying design, she immediately commissioned a website and new branding materials. "My nephew's been managing our social media and website," she explained. "But he's 13 and thinks animated GIFs of dancing coffee cups are the height of sophistication." The project took me 3 weeks of intensive work. When I unveiled the finished product, a clean, warm-toned site with professional photography and intuitive navigation, Sophia was ecstatic. "This is professional work, Cassie," she insisted, examining each page. "You're undercharging by at least half." Her enthusiasm and referrals to other local business owners launched my fledgling career. Within weeks, I had 4 more clients and a waiting list developing. For the first time, I was earning money doing something I genuinely enjoyed, working on my own terms, building something that was entirely mine. 8 months after my departure from Michigan, I finally felt settled. My condo was furnished exactly to my taste, coastal without being kitschy, comfortable without being cluttered. My business was growing steadily, providing both creative fulfillment and sustainable income. I had a small but genuine circle of friends who knew me as I was now, not as the shadow of my sister. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the Gulf waters in shades of orange and pink, my new phone rang with Uncle James's special ringtone. "They know you're in Florida," he said, without preamble. "Allison mentioned seeing a charge from a Naples restaurant on one of the accounts you used to have joint access to." My blood ran cold. I'd been so careful, but I'd forgotten about an old Amazon account linked to a credit card I rarely used. "How certain are they?" "Certain enough that they're planning a trip to reconnect with you," he replied grimly. Richard mentioned Naples specifically. "When?" "2 weeks from now." He asked if I wanted to join them. Make it a family vacation. I ended the call and sat motionless, watching darkness claim the horizon. After everything I'd built here, the peace I'd found, the person I was becoming, they were still reaching for me, still trying to pull me back into their orbit. For a fleeting moment, I considered running again, finding another state, another identity, another life. But as quickly as the thought arose, I dismissed it. I was done running. It was time to face them on my terms, with my power intact. The morning I knew my family would arrive in Naples, I walked along the shore, waves lapping at my ankles as I rehearsed what I would say. After Uncle James's warning, I'd spent 2 weeks preparing consulting with Janet about legal protections, arranging for additional security measures at my condo complex, and mentally fortifying myself for the confrontation. I had no intention of letting them find me on their terms. I would control this encounter, from location to duration to outcome. I returned to my condo, showered, and dressed with deliberate care, a tailored blue blazer over a white silk blouse and crisp linen pants. Professional. Composed. Nothing like the tearful, flustered daughter who had fled Michigan 8 months earlier. At precisely 10 a.m., my doorbell rang. Not my family, they had no idea where I lived, but David Winters, a private investigator I'd hired the previous week. "They checked into the Bayfront Hilton last night," he reported, handing me a folder with surveillance photos. 3 of them, as expected. "They've been asking questions at local businesses, showing your photo. Nothing subtle about it." I nodded, unsurprised. Subtlety had never been my family's strong suit. "There's something else," David added. "The sister, Allison, she's been making calls to real estate agents, asking about recent property purchases matching certain parameters. She's trying to locate your condo. This was new information. And concerning. How close is she getting? Not very. She's working with outdated assumptions about your finances, looking at properties half the value of what you actually purchased. He hesitated. There's also a scheduled interview with a local newspaper tomorrow. Your father arranged it human interest story about a family searching for their daughter. The media angle again. Always their favorite pressure point. Thank you, David. Our original plan stands. The restaurant at noon. After he left, I called Janet to confirm she'd be present for the meeting, then contacted the restaurant to verify our private dining room reservation. Everything was in place. At 11:45, I arrived at Oceano, an upscale seafood restaurant overlooking the bay. The manager, briefed in advance, escorted me to the private room where Janet was already waiting. Legal documents arranged neatly on the table. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, studying my face. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, taking my seat with my back to the wall, facing the door. A position of power, something I'd read about in a business negotiation book. At exactly noon, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Target's approaching restaurant. Minutes later, the manager appeared at the door. "Miss Mitchell, your guests have arrived." I nodded, and he stepped aside. My father entered first, his confident stride faltering slightly when he saw me sitting composed behind the table. My mother followed, her hand flying to her mouth in a theatrical gesture of surprise. Allison came last, her expression shifting from triumph to wariness as she assessed the situation. For a moment, no one spoke. I studied them with the strange detachment of seeing once familiar faces after a significant absence. Dad's hair had more gray. Mom looked thinner, more lined around the eyes. Allison had cut her hair into a severe bob that didn't suit her. "Cassie," Mom finally breathed, moving toward me with arms outstretched. "Oh, my baby. We've been so worried. Please take a seat," I said evenly, gesturing to the chairs across from me. "All of you." Mom froze, hurt flashing across her face at my lack of emotional response. Dad placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her to a chair. "You've led us on quite a chase," he said, attempting a jovial tone that didn't reach his eyes. "Your mother's been beside herself with worry." "I find that hard to believe," I replied coolly, considering my lawyer sent a formal statement months ago confirming I was safe and requesting privacy. "A lawyer isn't the same as hearing from you directly," Mom interjected, tears already forming. "We're your family, Cassie." "Family," I repeated. "Let's talk about that. This is Janet Kim, my attorney." I gestured to Janet. "She's here because this isn't a family reunion. It's a formal meeting to establish boundaries going forward." "Boundaries?" Dad scoffed. "We don't need lawyers to talk to our own daughter. Recent history suggests otherwise," I countered. "Before we continue, I want to clarify something. I am not missing. I am not mentally unstable. I relocated deliberately after you gave me an ultimatum. Give half my lottery winnings to Allison or leave. I chose to leave." "You took that completely out of context," Dad protested. "It was said in the heat of an argument. Was it also heat of the moment when Allison broke into my apartment and stole my financial documents?" I asked, sliding one of the photos across the table. The security camera image showed Allison clearly entering my old apartment. "Or when she attempted to access my bank accounts using my stolen identification?" Allison paled. Mom looked at her in confusion. "You told us you were just getting some things Cassie had borrowed," Mom said. "Don't act surprised," I told her. "Uncle James confirmed you all knew exactly what was happening." "James," Dad muttered. "Should have known he was involved." I removed more documents from a folder. I have evidence of everything. The break-in, the attempted fraud, the missing persons report filed despite knowing I wasn't missing. The false claims about my mental health to the media. "What exactly are you saying, Cassandra?" Dad asked, his voice hardening. "I'm saying I have enough to pursue criminal charges for theft, attempted fraud, and defamation," I stated flatly. "I'm also saying I won't do that if certain conditions are met." Janet slid a document toward them. "This is a legal agreement. It stipulates that in exchange for Miss..." Mitchell not pursuing criminal charges. The Mitchell family agrees to cease all contact unless explicitly invited by Miss Mitchell, discontinue all public statements regarding her, and make no further attempts to locate her residence or access her financial information. Dad's face flushed deep red. This is ridiculous. You're our daughter. Being your daughter doesn't give you the right to steal from me, lie about me, or harass me, I replied. You have two options. Sign the agreement and leave Florida today, or I file criminal charges this afternoon. Mom was openly weeping now. How can you do this to us? After everything we've done for you? I leaned forward. Let's be clear about what you've done for me. You consistently prioritized Allison over me my entire life. You dismissed my achievements, minimized my struggles, and treated me as an afterthought. When I finally had something you wanted, money, you didn't ask for help. You demanded it as your right. When I offered a reasonable compromise, you issued ultimatums. When I left, you publicly painted me as mentally unstable, rather than respecting my choice. That's not fair, Allison interjected. We've been worried sick about you. Worried about me? Or worried about accessing my money? I countered. Because breaking into my apartment and attempting to drain my accounts doesn't feel like concern. It feels like theft. Dad stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to listen to this. Come on, Diane. Allison. We're leaving. Janet cleared her throat. Mr. Mitchell, if you leave without signing, I'll be filing the police report within the hour. The Naples Police Department is already aware of the situation and has copies of all evidence on standby. He froze, uncertainty replacing anger. You wouldn't. I don't want to, I said honestly. Despite everything, I don't want to see any of you facing criminal charges. But I will, if that's what it takes to protect myself. A heavy silence descended. Dad slowly sank back into his chair, defeat evident in his slumped shoulders. What do you want from us, Cassie? Mom asked quietly. I want what I've always wanted. Respect for my autonomy, acknowledgement of my worth, and recognition that I deserve to make my own choices. And if we sign this agreement? Dad asked. Then you return to Michigan, and I continue my life here. I'll contact you if and when I feel ready. No guarantee of when or if that might happen. Another silence, longer this time. Finally, Dad reached for the document, scanning its contents with narrowed eyes. And the money? Is there any possibility of reconsidering help for the family? I had anticipated this question. My previous offer of $50,000 for critical medical and business needs remains available, contingent upon signing the agreement and providing legitimate documentation of those needs. To be clear, that does not include Allison's student loans or any general family fund. Mom looked up hopefully. Dad's expression remained unreadable as he reached for the pen Janet offered. One by one, they signed. Dad first, his signature an angry scrawl. Mom with trembling hands. Allison last, her face a mask of resentment. Copies will be provided to each of you, Janet said, collecting the documents. Flight confirmation back to Michigan needs to be provided by 5 p.m. today. You've changed, Allison said suddenly, staring at me. You're different. Yes, I acknowledged. I am. As they stood to leave, Mom made one last attempt, reaching for my hand across the table. Cassie, honey, we love you. We've always loved you. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. Love without respect isn't enough. It never was. They filed out silently, escorted by the restaurant manager. Through the window, I watched them walk to their rental car, Mom leaning heavily on Dad's arm, Allison trailing behind with hunched shoulders. A complex mixture of emotions washed through me: relief, sadness, resolution, and somewhere beneath it all, a quiet certainty that I'd done the right thing. That went as well as could be expected, Janet observed, organizing her briefcase. Are you okay? I turned from the window. Yes, I said, surprised to find it was true. I think I am. 1 year to the day after winning the lottery, I stood on my balcony watching pelicans dive into the Gulf waters, marveling at how differently my life had unfolded than I could have possibly imagined. The date had arrived without conscious recognition. I was midway through my morning coffee before the significance registered, causing me to pause and reflect on the journey. My graphic design business, initially a hopeful experiment, had flourished beyond expectations. What began as small projects for local shops had expanded to corporate clients, and a specialized niche creating branding packages for women-owned businesses. I'd hired my first assistant last month, a fellow designer named Rachel, who brought complementary skills and a welcome perspective to larger projects. My condo had transformed from a blank slate to a personal sanctuary. Every room reflected intentional choices. The living room with its comfortable sectional and wall of bookshelves. The home office overlooking the water, designed for creativity and focus. The guest bedroom prepared for Uncle James's frequent visits. Each space represented not just my aesthetic preferences, but the freedom to create a home entirely on my own terms. Most significantly, I'd cultivated genuine relationships built on mutual respect rather than obligation or history. My friendship with Tara had deepened into a sister-like bond, one where differences were celebrated rather than compared. Sophia from the coffee shop had become a mentor in both business and life wisdom. I'd even begun dating Michael, a marine biologist I met during a community beach cleanup, a relationship proceeding at a careful pace built on honest communication and healthy boundaries. These external changes reflected deeper internal transformations. Weekly sessions with Dr. Rivera, a therapist specializing in family trauma, had helped me recognize and address patterns established during childhood. I learned to identify the voice in my head that still whispered I wasn't enough, wasn't smart enough, like Allison, wasn't worthy enough for my parents' attention, wasn't deserving of my own good fortune. The lottery didn't create your family's toxic dynamics, Dr. Rivera had observed during an early session. It merely magnified what was already there. That insight had been pivotal understanding that money had been a catalyst rather than a cause. The entitlement, the manipulation, the conditional love all existed long before I purchased that fateful ticket. My phone chimed with a reminder. Uncle James would arrive in 3 hours for his birthday weekend visit. Our relationship had strengthened into one of the most meaningful connections in my life. He called regularly, visited quarterly, and never pressured me about reconciliation with the rest of the family. Through him, I received occasional updates. Dad had finally sold the struggling hardware store and taken a management position at a large home improvement chain, a move he'd resisted for years out of pride. Mom had gotten her dental work done through insurance at Dad's new job. They had downsized to a smaller house, a necessary financial adjustment after years of living beyond their means. And Allison, surprisingly, had been the one to reach out first. 6 months after the confrontation in Naples, a letter arrived via Janet's office. Handwritten on simple stationery, it contained no demands, no accusations, just a seemingly genuine acknowledgement of her role in the family dynamics and her actions following my lottery win. "I've started therapy," she wrote. "Turns out, being the golden child leaves its own scars. I'm beginning to understand how much pressure I internalized and how I perpetuated the family patterns. I'm not asking for forgiveness or even a response. I just wanted you to know I'm working on myself and I'm sorry for my part in hurting you." I read the letter multiple times before storing it in my desk drawer, uncertain how to respond or even if I should. Part of me suspected another manipulation. Another part recognized what it had cost her to write those words. I ultimately decided not to reply immediately, allowing myself time to process without rushing to either reconciliation or rejection. The doorbell interrupted my reflections. Uncle James wasn't due for hours, and I wasn't expecting deliveries. Through the security peephole, I was surprised to see a courier holding a large envelope. After signing for it, I examined the sender information. My mother's name, with a return address I didn't recognize. Inside was a birthday card, simple, tasteful, not overly sentimental, and a small package carefully wrapped in tissue paper. The card contained just 3 lines in my mother's distinctive handwriting. "Happy birthday, Cassie. No strings attached. Just wanted you to have this. Love, Mom." The package contained my grandmother's sapphire pendant, a family heirloom I'd always admired but assumed would go to Allison. I'd mentioned once, years ago, how the deep blue stone reminded me of the ocean. I was stunned that my mother had remembered. more stunned that she had chosen to give it to me now. No demands for response. No guilt trips. No manipulation tactics. Just a simple gift on my birthday. I placed the pendant on my dresser, emotions too complex to immediately identify. Later that afternoon, I mentioned it to Uncle James as we walked along the shore. "She's trying. In her way," he said carefully. "Your father is having a harder time. His pride was always his weakness." "I'm not ready to reestablish regular contact," I admitted. "But this feels different from their previous attempts." "You don't need to decide anything today," he reminded me. Or ever, for that matter. Your boundaries are yours to maintain or adjust as you see fit. That evening, we celebrated his birthday with dinner on my balcony. As we enjoyed key lime pie, his favorite, he raised his glass in a toast. "To choices," he said simply. "To choices," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. Later that week, I made 2 significant decisions. First, I established the Mitchell Educational Fund, a scholarship program for students from my hometown who demonstrated academic potential despite challenging circumstances. The irony wasn't lost on me creating an opportunity I never had for others who might otherwise be overlooked. Second, I picked up my phone and, after a long moment of hesitation, called my mother. The conversation was brief, somewhat awkward, but civil. I thanked her for the pendant. She asked about the weather in Florida. Neither of us mentioned the past or made promises about the future. But it was a start, a small opening in a door I had firmly closed a year earlier. When we hung up, I felt neither regret nor excitement. Just a quiet acknowledgement that healing isn't linear and closure doesn't always arrive in expected forms. The journey from Michigan to Florida had been about much more than physical distance. It had been about finding my worth in a world that had consistently undervalued it. Standing on my balcony that evening, watching the sun sink into the Gulf in a blaze of orange and pink, I reflected on how winning the lottery had ultimately given me something far more valuable than financial freedom. It had forced me to recognize my own value when those who should have seen it most clearly had consistently failed to do so. The money hadn't changed me fundamentally. It had simply given me the resources to become more fully myself, to break generational patterns, and to build a life aligned with my own values rather than others' expectations. That, I realized, was the true jackpot. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family over money or other issues? What would you have done in Cassie's situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself sometimes. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the greatest act of self-love is knowing when to walk away and when to cautiously open the door again.